The very first and most important thing is that the enemy of good food is time. And the faster that you can get something from kitchen production line to consumer, the better off you are because you prevent a lot of potential issues. So rather than having to solve them later, you're just preventing them.
You're listening to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technology in the food and supplement industries, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Lydia Adams. Let's jump right in. Welcome to today's episode of Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork. We're delighted to welcome Meredith Sandland, the CEO of Empowered Delivery, a software company revolutionizing the food delivery industry by enabling restaurants to take control of their off-premise operations through first-party ordering, resource-aware meal production, and fleet orchestration. Meredith is also the co-author of the best-selling books, Delivering the Digital Restaurant, Your Roadmap to the Future of Food, and Delivering the Digital Restaurant, The Path to Digital Maturity. With a wealth of experience, including her role as Chief Development Officer at Taco Bell, Meredith brings deep insights into how technology can transform restaurant delivery for better guest experiences and more efficient operations. Welcome to the show, Meredith.
Thank you so much, Lydia. I'm so happy to be here talking with you.
Yeah, we're excited to get into this really rich topic. So before we do, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, what inspired you to really focus on food delivery and how that intersects with safety and technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been in restaurants for a long time. You mentioned I was at Taco Bell. I was there before you could order a taco online and before DoorDash existed. So, I was there right at the birth of those things and have been around it for a long time. When I saw delivery come into the world, I was extremely excited about it and thought it would be an excellent opportunity to get food to people who maybe couldn't cook for themselves or couldn't easily procure it. So these might be people who were disabled, elderly, two working parents living in a food desert, don't own a car, all kinds of things like that. And it seemed like it could be a huge boon to us as a society. And certainly it's proven out that consumers want delivery. But the way that it's happening today is I'll call it disjointed, and that results in certainly some expense, some poor quality, and potentially also some food safety issues. So what I have gotten involved with Empower Delivery is a system that helps all three of those things.
That's awesome. And yeah, just to see the shift in food delivery in the last few years has been incredible. And then, as you said, it's definitely consumers are very interested in getting their food this way. So I love that we're going to talk about this. And you with your history, you've worked for major brands. You mentioned Taco Bell, Kitchen United. How does that really influence your approach to food safety within the delivery space?
Yeah, well, these big brands take food safety extremely seriously, right? So obviously working with Taco Bell, spent a lot of time and effort on food safety all the way through the supply chain. I sit on the board of Qdoba. They also spend a lot of time and attention on food safety. At Kitchen United, we worked with many different brands, so I got to see all of their approaches to food safety. And I think what's fascinating about delivery in the restaurant space is that these huge companies, these restaurants spend so much time, effort, resources on food safety, whether it's, making sure that a plant is up to spec and doing routine visits at it, figuring out the supply chain from the plant to the DC all the way to the restaurant, doing tons of different checks inside the restaurant to make sure that food is at the proper temp and is stored for the right amount of time and used in the correct way. Just doing an incredible amount of training and checking to make sure that at every step in the journey, everything's fine. And then they get to delivery. And it's like all of that goes out the window and they spent so much time and effort and attention on this. And then they take the food and they give it to a stranger who's really employed by no one and responsible at best to a totally different company and hope that everything turns out fine. And it's a very odd, like, why would you put that much effort all the way through the chain only for at the last minute when things are actually the most sensitive, right? They've already been cooked and most potential for something to go horribly awry, and just hand it off and hope for the best. Like, can you imagine doing that in a restaurant, in an actual restaurant? Like, you're working at the drive-through and your consumers aren't allowed to come to the window, and instead you hand food to a stranger and then they run it out to the parking lot. Like, you would never do that, right? You would never do that in a restaurant. But somehow in delivery, we've just suspended our disbelief and said, it will be fine.
I'm laughing because I feel like consumers, we will choose convenience every time, but we may not know, like consumers may not know kind of that history that's been, all of the procedures that have happened prior to that food getting to that delivery individual and not realize kind of what's occurred there. Like what you just described is probably not always top of mind, for the consumer. So like, what do you see are really the biggest challenges in maintaining that food safety and quality throughout that delivery process?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is that with the preponderance of delivery today being third-party delivery, the chain is just really broken. The chain is broken in terms of who owns the product while it's being transported, the conditions under which it's being transported. And now with batching of the items across restaurants, the time is taking longer and longer and longer from the moment the food is prepared until the consumer actually receives it. And those are all challenging things, certainly for quality, right? But especially for food safety as well. We have saying at our company that is the enemy of good food is time. And that's just based on cooking at home, right? If you cook something and then you let it sit there for a half an hour before you get around to eating it, it's not going to be as good as if you eat it right off the stovetop or out of the oven, right? And so if the enemy of good food is time, why would you ever create a system that makes things take more time, right? And what has happened in food delivery is that for some reason, restaurants have accepted that the system is broken and that it takes a lot of time. And so they are trying to figure out workarounds to deal with that time, assuming that it is there, right? So whether this is a hot bag or maybe a cold or hot locker, different ways to try to protect the food with packaging, things like that, rather than dealing with that time issue. And if you are able to shorten the time from when the food is prepared to when the food is received by the consumer, most of the quality and food safety issues evaporate because time is the problem.
Yeah. And then as you said, I mean, typically if you're a guest in the restaurant, you're not dealing with that additional issue. And so you're getting that straight from, and it has that certain quality that you expect. Do you find that your customers, that the restaurants that you work with, discover that it's not just obviously food safety, but, more of a branding concern of once the food gets to the individual that ordered it, it's not the same or it doesn't taste as good. And that becomes kind of, a whole other brand problem for them. Have you seen that?
That's right. So our full system is vertically integrated, kind of the way that old school pizza is vertically integrated, right? It's the ordering system, the brand, the real estate, the operations, and the delivery are all one chain. And they are all one chain in terms of who's executing them, the same company, but they are also all one chain in terms of how the technology works together to optimize that process. And there are a couple great things that happen along the way because of that vertical integration. The very first one is exactly what I was talking about with time, right? If I can figure out how to produce all of the food so that it's ready at the exact same time that a delivery driver pulled up, and then have that food go directly to the consumer, it is not going to sit and wait, right? So generally the food will get there between when it comes off the kitchen line to when it gets in the consumer's hands in 10 minutes or less on our system. And that is absolutely unheard of in the disjointed world of food delivery, right? Because even if it's one driver taking one order a very short distance, the odds that the food hasn't been sitting and waiting for that driver to show up and pick it up is very low. So there's always some time lag there, and time lag is where potential food safety issues get introduced, and certainly where quality issues get introduced. So if you look at customers who are on the Empower Delivery platform and look at their online reviews, an interesting thing happens. They're all 4.8, 4.9 stars. Consumers often are talking about the process as much as they're talking about the food. I got my food so quickly. My food was so hot. My food was so fresh. The driver was so nice. All of these things that, yes, the food is good, but all of these things that you would never hear and when they're talking about DoorDash or Uber or any other third-party system, right? In a third-party system, you tend to hear things like, it was pretty good for delivery, which is never a good sign, right? It's pretty good for means it wasn't that great. If I had gone there, it would have been better, right?
Could you maybe share some specific innovations and practices that Empower Delivery uses, to kind of like mitigate some of these risks and ensure that, everything is delivered properly?
The very first and most important thing is the heart of the system and the timing, and the belief that the enemy of good food is time. And the faster that you can get something from kitchen production line to consumer, the better off you are, because you prevent a lot of potential issues. So rather than having to solve them later, you're just preventing them. And the main thing that happens in the heart of the software is algorithmic-based timing that ensures that every item is finished at the exact same time. So the entire order is finished at the exact same time. And that order is finished exactly as the driver pulls up to take it away. And the way that we do that is using sophisticated machine learning algorithms inside the software that are cognizant of everything that's going on in the kitchen. They are aware of how much capacity each station has, how long each item takes, what the current utilization of each station is. So let's say you've got an order come in that's got a salad, a hamburger, and a pizza. Well, the salad's grab and go. Okay, don't take that out till the very last second. The pizza takes 3 minutes in the oven, whereas the hamburger takes 7 minutes. Okay, well, it seems like probably we should start the hamburger and then do the pizza. Oh, but wait, there are 50 pizzas ahead of that pizza in line that all need to be prepared, so it can't go in. Well, now, actually, what we need to do is hold the whole order back until the pizza can get through the oven and then start the hamburger as we're getting very close to the finishing of the pizza, and then grab the salad at the last minute. So all three of those items are going to come out at exactly the same time, which means they're all going to be hot and fresh, or in the case of the salad, cold. And that's going to happen exactly as the driver pulls up. So the belief is very much where you can prevent problems, right? That is much, much easier than having to go out and get special packaging to solve a problem, or have to figure out how to refund a customer because they were unhappy, or God forbid, deal with some much more potentially serious food safety issue.
What about like delivery routes? Does that play into the software as well?
Well, I think on the delivery side, what the software does is enable dedicated on-demand delivery. So what that means is that the drivers are in-house, right? They are known to the restaurant, but they are also gig contractors. So it is the brand experience of in-house with the flexibility of the gig contracting model. And what that enables is the restaurant to know the driver who's taking the food, right? So in a typical third-party delivery scenario, the drivers that happen to come in to pick up the food are totally random, right? Maybe you saw them yesterday, maybe you've never seen them before. You don't know them. Once they leave, you may never see them again. So what that means is if something goes wrong, you have no way of addressing what happened or who did it or why. I think restaurants, depending on their contracts with third parties, can say, I don't want that driver to come here anymore. But can you actually control that that driver doesn't come there anymore? Probably not. And say, for example, drivers are sharing an account, and it's two different drivers on one account. The third parties will say, well, we use ID verification to prevent that, but that's only going to be once every so often. If I am an expo at a restaurant and I see that driver every day, the second someone shows up that I don't know, I'm going to know exactly there's something amiss here. There's something awry. right? So controlling that driver force at the local level, knowing who they are, is incredibly important. And then having food safety policies associated with that, right? So again, when you go through onboarding in a third-party system, and I don't know if you've ever done this, but it's interesting to do, to go drive for one of these guys to see. When you go through their onboarding, certainly, they'll have you check some T's and C's and promise not to do this or that or comply with these things. But if you go through our onboarding, the restaurant can require their own T's and C's. So they might say, like from a food safety and health standpoint, hey, if you have a fever, don't come deliver for us. Like, you need to stay home. Like, this is a gig contract and we will offer you a contract anytime you want. But if you're sick, you should not accept that contract. The third parties have no way of enforcing that, right? Because the drivers are out there. There's no human who's responsible for them, seeing them, knowing that. But in the case of a dedicated on-demand delivery system, again, that expo, if someone pulls up and is looking feverish and not good and coughing and sneezing and all kinds of stuff, they're going to know instantly, you shouldn't be driving today, ma'am. Like, you're not feeling well, go home. And that is a very, very different and unique ability of having a dedicated on-demand fleet.
So basically, then the restaurant can really enforce those their own standards, essentially, as well as obviously food safety regulations, which is currently also not a huge part of the third-party system, right?
Yeah, it is interesting, right? We would say to restaurant workers, if you're sick, don't come in, and we'll hang posters on the walls in the kitchen and enforce that, right? But there's no way to enforce that in a third-party contract environment. There's just no way, right? If someone needs to drive, I call it the gig ATM. If they need the gig ATM and they need the cash, if they're sick, there's no way to enforce that. And I am not convinced that any amount of regulation would enforce that, because it is such a decentralized, distributed model where no one is really responsible. Who would even say that person was sick, they shouldn't be driving? Right?
Yeah, that was my next question, is if you see a future where this becomes part of the regulations that, typical food distribution would have to follow, would that ever then apply to delivery?
I think it can. I think there would be municipalities or federal government who would have, in the executive branch, who would have strong incentive to make that happen. But the problem is enforcement. Even if you say that's important to you or put in a rule or regulation that requires certain behaviors from the driver workforce, who is going to enforce that? DoorDash, Uber, they never see these people in person. They would never know. The only people who's seeing them is the restaurant, and the restaurant doesn't control them. The restaurant can't say to them, I'm not giving you this order because you're sick.
What steps does Empower Delivery really take to provide transparency and security throughout the delivery process?
The software enables a restaurant to have its own dedicated on-demand fleet, right? So the software is set up with the belief that, almost like a workforce management software, the restaurant knows best what the local regulations are, what its policies should be, and how to take care of its own guest. And each restaurant is going to have maybe slightly different requirements for what that means to them, and what a great brand experience is. And the software enables each restaurant to have its own setup in that. As a software company, we don't, enforce restaurants must do this or must do that, but we make it possible for them to do what they care about.
So, in your view, what is the responsibility of the delivery driver in terms of, food safety and quality? And, obviously, maybe they're not, it's not regulated, but what should they be doing?
I think that's a really tricky question to answer. And, first of all, I must say, the vast majority of delivery drivers are excellent. I don't know, I interview them all the time to hear about their experiences and why they're driving. And the vast majority of them are excellent, just like the vast majority of restaurant workers are excellent. But all of these rules and regulations exist for the exceptions, right? Not the common practice. And to make sure that, things don't go horribly awry in a very, very small percentage of cases, right? So I think, stepping back, it must be said that, there are not a lot of drivers out there acting nefariously. And I think most of them have great, great intentions and are doing the right thing. But in general, I would say that a delivery driver should follow very similar practice to what a restaurant worker follows, which means they should be washing and sanitizing their hands. Like if they, for whatever reason, happen to deliver food and like shake hands or high five with the guest, probably need to wash hands and sanitize in between. They should not be adding unnecessary time to the journey. So there are some delivery drivers who do what I call self-batching. So they carry two phones, one's operating on Uber, one on DoorDash, and they do multiple stops along the way so that they can get paid double for that journey, and then do multiple stops at drop-off. And that adds a lot of time to the journey. And of course, the enemy of good food is time, right? If there does happen to be some kind of foodborne illness in that food, the longer that illness has time to, I'll call it gestate in the food, the more risky it is, right? So shortening that time, super, super important. Obviously not tampering with the food in any way, not opening the food. I think restaurants have gotten really sophisticated around adding staples and stickers and things like that to their packaging so that it is at least evident to a consumer if something's been tampered with, which I think is great. So that would be a very important step for a driver to take.
Kind of thinking back to something that you said earlier, with the generative AI, I guess, the software being able to say, hey, the hamburger takes 7 minutes and, the salad takes 2 minutes to assemble. I feel like that technology would also benefit the restaurant for in-room dining. Have you seen that use case kind of as well as the delivery?
Absolutely. I think, figuring out how to bring food together at the right time has historically been the function of the expediter in the restaurant. Has it been a human being saying, drop this, where's my, do this, right? And trying to bring all those things together at the exact same time. And what the software is essentially an AI-driven expediter, right? Where you are putting that role into software. And the great news about that is even the best expediter has a bad day, forgets things, gets overwhelmed because there are too many dishes being ordered at the same time, loses track of something. And we've all had this experience as consumers at a restaurant when they forget a dish, right? And that typically is a reflection of, a human breakdown where the kitchen just cannot keep track of the volume of things that are coming in. The great thing about computers is that they do not have bad days. They never get overwhelmed. They can keep track of all kinds of information. And the more information you give them, actually, the better they do. And so, yes, you're right. Being able to bring all of those items together in a software-based expo is absolutely a function of the software and something that I think restaurants will adopt increasingly. The pleasant side effect of that, having nothing to do with food safety, is an increase in utilization of each station, right? Because you don't have stations sitting idle when they could be working, and you are pulling forward orders that maybe are going to less utilized stations. As you pull forward orders that are going to less utilized stations, you're able to get food out of the kitchen more quickly. Getting food out of the kitchen more quickly in the case of a restaurant with tables, of course, can increase the table turns. So all of those things are positive benefits of having a system like this.
Like I was saying, we've just seen so much change post-COVID and, all of those things with in the last few years. As this continues to evolve, what future trends or innovations do you anticipate that you're going to see in this space moving forward?
As it relates to food safety specifically, I think we will see the pendulum swing and we will see restaurants take back delivery in-house. Now, I believe that the W-2 delivery model is broken and having employed delivery drivers just doesn't work. What the companies like DoorDash and Uber and Instacart have shown us is that the people who deliver like to be employed as 1099s, right? They like to have flexibility in their scheduling. They like to write off their cars and, whatever else they do in the spare time that they have. And that model is just superior to a W-2 employed model. I think we swung from in-house delivery, which most of course, like pizza and Chinese places historically have done, to outsourcing delivery in the form of something like a DoorDash, Uber, Instacart. I think we will swing back to an in-house model to enable better control, better guest experience, better food safety, better issue resolution, right? All of those things are possible when those drivers are in-house. And the difference will be that we will just have a new way of employing these people, right? We will be able to have our own in-house drivers that meet our brand standards and that we can make sure are not working when they're sick or what have you, but also are employed on a very flexible 1099 contractor model.
And how do you feel like that's going to kind of relate to the consumer? Are the consumers going to start to see the benefits of maybe having that quality brought back in house, or how do you think that future looks like?
That's an interesting question. I think that the consumer will ultimately notice, and it's happening in retail already. This is how Walmart delivers with the Walmart Spark program, how Amazon delivers with the Amazon Flex program. Much of that actually is grocery-based food items that are being delivered, right? And I think that system is faster, it is cheaper, it is higher quality, and consumers grow to trust it. And there is a reason why Amazon and Walmart are doing really, really well in grocery delivery, and why folks who are leaning on outside third parties are not doing as well, right? So I think the same thing will happen in restaurant, where you'll start to see folks who do incredibly high volumes of delivery in their context move to this dedicated on-demand delivery model, and consumers will start to vote with their feet, and they'll say, well, that is better, faster, and cheaper. And guess what? Better, faster, and cheaper usually wins.
That's true. All right. And so, what advice would you give to restaurant operators right now who are looking at, they want to prioritize food safety and quality, they want to keep up with the delivery landscape, how do they adapt and, stay relevant in that space?
The first thing I would say is do or do not. There is no try. You have to make a decision as a restaurant. Is delivery a business you want to be in or not? Do not begrudgingly do it on the side with 5 orders a day that go outsourced. If you do it that way, your team in the restaurant is not going to pay a lot of attention to it. You are not going to have the resources to invest in, appropriate packaging and tamper-proofing and all of those kinds of things. And you're just sort of going to give it up to, an outside third party and hope for the best. And that model, I think, leads to more errors. That model leads to the in-restaurant staff not caring as much about delivery. And so if you are going to be in it, step one, really be in it, believe in it, treat it as an important channel for your business, and then make decisions accordingly. So the first of those decisions might be around, which items you offer for delivery, how you package those items. And then the next set of decisions really will be around time and control. So how can you reduce the time from kitchen to curb? And how can you improve the brand experience during that journey?
Yeah, that's really good advice. Can you tell me a little bit about your books?
First one is Your Roadmap to the Future of Food. And the second one is The Path to Digital Maturity. The first one is really the what is happening, why is it happening? It's very much talking about how the consumer is changing and the technological forces that are coming about at the same time that the consumer is changing. Carl Orsborn and I, my co-author, wrote the book during COVID. We actually started writing right before COVID. And then, we're in a hurry to get it out because it turned out all restaurants desperately needed to know this information. What had been something that leading brands were starting to adopt instantly became something that everyone had to do to survive. So that first book is really the what's changing, why it's changing, very much consumer and technology led. And then the second book is much more for independent restaurants. That's really the how. Right? Where do you begin with all of this stuff? How do you do it well? And what are the steps you take along the journey?
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. I just have one more question for you. So, obviously you've been in this business for a long time. What is, one of the most important lessons that you've learned about building trust with customers through safe and reliable food?
Customers being the guest, not the restaurant. Yes, we're a B2B2C company, so I always have to clarify which customers
Either
are we talking
way,
about.
but
So
building trust in the
yeah,
in supply
absolutely.
chain,
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely. So, consumers will never see all of the work that restaurants do behind the scenes, right? They will never know that we took a visit to that factory to make sure that they were operating with great practices. They will never know how much time and effort that we spend on the DCs and on the trucks themselves. They will never know about the amount of modeling that goes into making sure that we get the right food in the right place at the right time so that things don't go bad and you're not being served something that's past date. They will never see that stuff. They will never see the temperature taking and the equipment upgrades and all of the things that the whole industry does to make sure that consumer food is safe. But what they will remember is that time that they got sick. And that will stick with them, right? If it ever happens, they will remember, oh, it was that kind of food, it was that brand, it was that location, and the odds that they go there again are pretty low, right? And so while it might be, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a thankless task to feel like we are engaging and taking care of people in a way that they will never truly understand or appreciate, um, when we do it right and we get it right and no one ever gets sick and no one ever has a problem, our best days are when we are invisible. And that is a really important thing to keep doing and to now carry forward and apply to food delivery.
That was a great answer. I love that. Thank you so much. And, where can listeners find out more about Empower Delivery?
Yeah, so we are at empower.delivery. No .com or anything, just empower.delivery. And I can be reached at Meredith at empower.delivery. We'd love to share a demo of the software with anyone who is doing a high volume of deliveries. I absolutely believe that dedicated on-demand delivery is the future. And if that is what describes your restaurant, high volume of deliveries, then we are here for you.
Well, Meredith, thank you so much for joining. This has been very interesting. I love topics that kind of move us into the future of where the food industry is heading, and delivery is certainly one of those. So thank you again for all of your insight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of food tech talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. To learn more about Trustwell and its technology platform that connects product formulation, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit www.trustwell.com. Thanks for listening.